In this video, we're going to look at the app called ProMovie. It's $2.99 on the App Store, though we're cheap, so we use the free version. And we're going to review it and see how we can utilize it to create the best looking videos. I'm Jai McGrath of 6eoxys, and this is 6eoxys Tutorials. Tip number one is to shoot in 4K. Now, I'm not a huge 4K fan. I don't think we're quite there where we need 4K yet. Now, there is a method to the madness. The reason for doing it is by shooting in 4K, you will have a higher resolution. And with a higher resolution, you're gonna be able to get rid of the watermark in your frame. And so what you'll do is you'll shoot in 4K, and by having a higher resolution, you can crop the image in post, and you're only going to lose a little bit of that resolution, and in the process you will also be getting rid of the watermarking in your frame. Tip number two is to turn on airplane mode when shooting. I'm gonna be honest with you, the battery life for ProMovie is not very good. I was out there with my friend Garrett shooting, and within literally the course of 10 minutes the battery went from 100% to 62%. Part of this was due to that the conditions were really cold, and so my phone was more susceptible to losing battery faster. But I'm gonna be honest with you, that is definitely a con to shooting with your iPhone, shooting video. The battery life sucks. There's no way to mince words about it. There's no other way around it. So turn on airplane mode to at least save a little bit of juice. Tip number three is to not zoom in when shooting with your iPhone. The reason I say this is because ProMovie utilizes the iPhone's built-in digital zoom. And unlike optical zoom, digital zoom uses the built-in software. So when you zoom in, what it's going to do is it's going to create a very pixelated image, as it's going to gradually reduce the pixels on your camera. And so what I mean by this is you're going to start seeing that the image quality is going to drop when you zoom in, and it's going to start really looking blocky and grainy, and ultimately it's going to look really unprofessional. So that is tip number three: don't zoom in when shooting with the iPhone. Tip number four is to understand that the aperture is going to stay at a fixed f1.8. As we had previously stated, zooming does not work, as it will pixelate and grain your image. So the best way to create a shallow depth of field that looks professional is to decrease your distance to the subject. Tip number five is to experiment with the slow motion frame rates and see kind of what effect you can create with the slow motion effects. So when you shoot in 1080, you can shoot in 240 frames per second. And it's just a fun little thing to try, you know. That's the big thing about this, is a lot of it is experimentation and seeing kind of what works when you're shooting with the iPhone and what doesn't work. And one thing that I found that works really well and looks really cool is when you shoot in a slower frame rate. So give it a shot. Shoot in a higher frame rate and see what it looks like when you're shooting in slow motion. And you'll see it looks pretty cool. And on the note of experimentation, that's going to lead us into, I'm gonna have to use both my hands for this. Tip number six, learn how the settings and the interface of ProMovie works. So the interface is kind of similar to that of a cinema camera, in that it uses a touchscreen interface when it comes to adjusting things like shutter speed and ISO and white balance. Ultimately everything, all of your settings are kind of displayed on screen, and you're gonna see everything and how they all kind of interact with each other. And at first it's gonna seem very confusing and very difficult, but once you get it down, once you practice with it before going out into a professional type of setting, you're gonna get a really good feel for how everything works and accompanies each other. And ultimately you're gonna find that it works just like a regular camera. And after a little bit of practice and a little bit of time and commitment, you're gonna get a really good feel for how this app works, and you're gonna be really good when you use it in a professional setting. Tip number seven is to, that's seven. Yeah, wait. No, that's eight. Wait. This is embarrassing. Tip number seven is to change the audio format to AAC. This is the better audio quality that you'll have on the phone, and this will ultimately sound better. I mean, it's not gonna sound like Skywalker Sound remixed it and everything, but ultimately it is gonna have a better sounding audio than if you were to use the other format. So change it to an AAC when you're shooting your videos. Tip number 8 is to understand that the iPhone sensor is not the greatest. First of all, it's not full frame, and I mean that's not as big of a deal, but it is a crop sensor and the color science is not the best with it. So when you're color grading it, and if you try to add a lot of effects and then you try to add a lot of looks to it, it's going to end up looking very grainy and may not look the way you originally wanted it to. So understand that the iPhone is not the world's greatest camera, and understand it's not about what kind of camera you're using, but what kind of person is behind that camera. So if you utilize it well and you utilize it right, you can really create some good looking stuff. Here's a little B-roll montage that we did, and we'll let you guys take a look at it and see for yourself whether you think that looks professional or not. Alright guys, a little fun edit there, just kind of doing some little cinematic type stuff, if you will. This is Johnny McGrath, the 6 Axis Tutorials. For all things camera related and tech related, keep it right here on 6 Axis.